Hello history buffs and welcome back to the channel. Today we're journeying back in time, deep into the heart of Mesopotamia, to uncover the story of one of the most powerful and feared figures in the ancient world, the king of Assyria. When you think of ancient rulers, names like Tutankhamun or Julius Caesar might pop into your head, but the Assyrian kings, they were a different breed entirely. They were supreme commanders, high priests, master builders, and the living embodiment of an empire that, at its peak, stretched from the mountains of Iran to the banks of the Nile. So, who exactly was the king of Assyria? The title itself, in Akkadian, was Šarru Ashur, meaning, quite literally, King of Ashur, the city-state that birthed this mighty empire. But this wasn't just a political title, it was a divine mandate. The king was seen as the chosen representative of the supreme god, also named Ashur. This divine connection gave him immense authority. He wasn't just a ruler. He was the chief steward of the gods on earth, tasked with maintaining cosmic order, or Kisat Zeruti, the kingship of the universe. This meant his duties were vast and all-encompassing, far beyond just sitting on a throne and looking regal. First and foremost, the Assyrian king was a warrior. The Assyrian Empire was forged in conflict and maintained through military might. The king was the commander-in-chief, and he didn't just lead from the rear. Bas-reliefs from their palaces show kings like Ashurnasirpal II and Tiglath-Pileser III personally leading the charge, riding in chariots, firing arrows at their enemies, and laying siege to fortified cities. Their annual military campaigns weren't just for conquest. They were a religious duty, seen as expanding the land of the god Ashur and punishing those who defied his will. These campaigns were meticulously planned and brutally efficient. The Assyrian army was a well-oiled machine, pioneering siege warfare, utilizing iron weapons on a massive scale, and employing psychological tactics to terrorize their opponents into submission. The king's personal bravery and success in battle were crucial for his legitimacy. A victorious king was a favored king of the gods. But the king's role wasn't just about war. He was also the high priest of the nation. He was the primary intermediary between the people and the pantheon of gods. He presided over the most important religious festivals, conducted sacrifices, and interpreted omens. The well-being of the entire empire was believed to rest on his proper performance of these rituals. If a plague swept the land or a harvest failed, it could be interpreted as a sign of divine displeasure, reflecting poorly on the king's piety. This spiritual responsibility was immense. The king had to constantly consult with diviners and priests to ensure the gods were appeased, making decisions based on signs found in the livers of sacrificial animals or the movements of the stars. It was a world where the divine and the political were completely intertwined. Beyond the battlefield and the temple, the Assyrian king was the ultimate administrator and chief justice of the empire. He was the final court of appeal. We have letters from ordinary people writing directly to the king, pleading for justice in land disputes or against corrupt local officials, while he delegated much of the day-to-day governance to a complex bureaucracy of governors and scribes. The buck stopped with him. He oversaw the collection of tribute from vassal states, managed the vast resources of the empire, and commissioned massive state projects. And when I say massive, I mean it. This brings us to one of the most visible legacies of the Assyrian kings. They were master builders. Kings like Sennacherib and Ashurbanipal didn't just conquer, they created. They built magnificent new capital cities like Nineveh, complete with sprawling palaces, soaring ziggurats, and lush gardens. Sennacherib famously constructed an incredible aqueduct system to bring water to Nineveh, an engineering feat that was unrivaled for its time. These palaces weren't just homes, they were statements of power. The walls were lined with incredible carved stone reliefs, depicting the king's triumphs, his military victories, his royal lion hunts, and his religious devotion. These carvings served as propaganda, designed to awe and intimidate any visiting dignitary or ambassador, reminding them of the king's absolute power. Imagine walking through these corridors, surrounded by vivid images of conquered cities and vanquished foes. The message was crystal clear. One of the most famous examples of this is Ashurbanipal, often considered the last great king of Assyria. While he was a capable military leader like his predecessors, he is best remembered for his intellect and his passion for knowledge. He assembled a colossal library at Nineveh, systematically collecting tens of thousands of cuneiform tablets from all over Mesopotamia. These texts covered everything from medicine and astronomy to literature and mythology, including the famous Epic of Gilgamesh. Ashurbanipal wasn't just hoarding texts, he was actively preserving the knowledge and culture of his world. He boasted that he could read the complex cuneiform script and understand the cunning utterances of the heavens and the earth. This library is one of the most important archaeological discoveries ever made, giving us an unparalleled window into the ancient Near East, all thanks to the vision of one king. The succession of an Assyrian king was a critical and often dangerous time. Ideally, the crown passed from father to son, usually the chosen crown prince. However, this was rarely simple. The king would often name his heir long before his death and have his vassals and officials swear loyalty oaths to the future ruler. But royal courts were hotbeds of intrigue. Brothers, uncles, and powerful nobles often vied for the throne, leading to civil wars and assassinations. The story of Sennacherib, who was murdered by two of his own sons, only for another son, Esarhaddon, to march on the capital and seize the throne, shows just how precarious the position could be. The king had to be constantly vigilant, watching for plots and conspiracies from within his own family and court. So, what was the daily life of an Assyrian king like? It was a life of opulent ceremony and crushing responsibility. He would wake to elaborate rituals, consult with his advisors and generals, receive reports from across the vast empire, and pass judgment on legal cases. He would also engage in the royal lion hunt, a highly symbolic activity. This wasn't just a sport. It was a staged event where captured lions were released in an arena for the king to kill. It was a public demonstration of the king's strength and his ability to defeat the forces of chaos. Represented by the wild lion and maintain order in the world. He was the protector of his people, in a very literal and theatrical sense. The image of the king of Assyria has often been one of a ruthless tyrant, and there's no denying the brutality of their warfare. Their own inscriptions boast of flaying enemies, creating pillars of heads, and deporting entire populations. This was a deliberate policy of terror designed to ensure compliance and discourage rebellion. But to see them only as monsters is to miss the complexity of their role. They were also patrons of the arts, pioneers of engineering, keepers of ancient knowledge, and the spiritual guardians of their people. They were builders as much as they were destroyers. They saw themselves as bringing divine order to a chaotic world, and in their own context, they were successful for centuries. The fall of the Assyrian Empire was as swift and dramatic as its rise. In 612 BC, a coalition of Babylonians and Medes sacked the great capital of Nineveh, bringing the empire crashing down. The last kings of Assyria fought to the bitter end, but their world was consumed by fire, yet their legacy endured. They created a blueprint for empire that would be copied by the Babylonians, the Persians, and even Alexander the Great. Their administrative systems, military tactics, and cultural achievements echoed through the centuries. So, the next time you hear the name Assyria, don't just think of war and conquest. Think of the Sharru Ashur, the king, a figure of immense complexity, a warrior, a priest, a judge, a builder, and a scholar. A man who believed he held the fate of the cosmos in his hands, ruling from the very center of the world. It's a powerful and fascinating story from the annals of history. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the world of the Assyrian kings. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next historical adventure. Let me know in the comments which ancient ruler you'd like to see covered next. Until then, stay curious.